Yeah, we are late.
I'm just standing by.
All right.
Red 5 standing
live.
by. Finally live.
So, joining us today at the Acme bench, do, it's the geek. And
Hi.
Drunk Julie, who will not be staying with us because she doesn't want to, be the stereotype that she so clearly is.
Yeah, and also I don't like you.
And joining us to talk about Choo Choo Twains is Mr. Anderson.
Where?
Our friend Nick Addison. So I forgot to send the links to you so you can put them in the doobie-doo. But once after I finish promoting the stream in all the places, I will share the links to planetripple.com. That'll be an easy one to remember. But then there's also Nick on the Planet Ripple YouTube channel, and then there's a Patreon, and there's you can buy his books off of Amazon and itch.io. Planet Ripple. There's 6 volumes now. So blah. And so hi Nick, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's cold here, but not unbearable.
Okay, good, because it's cold enough for me that I'm wearing layers now. Don't worry, I do got a heater so I can turn it on if I want to.
Whereas
I haven't
can go
had
outside
to put on a
shorts
hat
and t-shirt.
indoors yet.
What you said? Okay, Nick said I haven't had to put a hat on. Oh, cat! No, everyone, be quiet.
I haven't had to start wearing a hat indoors yet. It'll happen.
It's
We just had a warm front come through. It's warm outside. I can go outside in shorts and a t-shirt at the moment.
So I see Joe McClory, David Scott, Groundhog, Digital Characters, John P, Mythro, and Emily Chambers are in the chat. How's everyone doing?
7.
I'm all right. I got pizza.
Can someone send me a link to the YouTube end of the podcast just so I can see the chat?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Here's our chat. There's
Groundhog, stop it, you southerner.
That's true. Yeah, Groundhog is in New Zealand, so it's summertime for her.
I want to go invade her country.
So you want to be just like the birds and just migrate to the country?
Yes. Well, it depends. I think I want to know if medical grade CBD is legal there, because if I have to get drunk every time I'm in too much pain, it's going to get old.
Yeah. It's just and plus if you just try to use that and you have to eventually you could build up a tolerance and then have to drink more to get more drunk, which is why I like being a lightweight, because it's cheaper to get drunk.
Definitely lightweight. I drank 2 glasses of port.
Oh, port! I do like ports. Nick, do you drink?
I don't.
I do not drink.
That's a good decision because alcohol is a poison.
Yeah,
I just don't see the appeal.
Don't. And well, the appeal for me is that it dulls the pain receptors in my brain, and it works better than my medication. I try not to drink too often then, because as the daughter of 2 alcoholics, no.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I indulge a few times a week, even though I hadn't drank for 15 years. That's why I'm a lightweight.
Mithril got a booster this week. Good for you, Mithril. And Mithril all the way in the UK too. So it's
Yay! The second or the third?
I think it's the 3rd shot, because I actually catch up to Novara Media, and they because the Omicron variant is going around in the UK. Boris Johnson is saying we probably should get make sure that the rest of the places have the 3rd boosters as well.
I can't before January or February, I think. It's 6 months. I had my 2nd shot in August.
So John Brockman is fortunately just trying to find the right headset so that actually works, so he can hear us.
A terrible host.
Okay, he's having technical difficulties, so I don't blame him. Nick had that issue before.
Stop being nice to John.
Oh, you're right. I should have been nice to John because I can't hear us right now.
He doesn't deserve it.
Is because John Franklin is only kind of an asshole.
Yeah, he's kind of an asshole.
So anyway,
yeah, I'm going to leave you. I'm going to go to bed. Or try to build something in the Sims. Maybe I'm in a good mood for that.
Oh, I'd hope to tell you a little bit about the trains.
Yeah,
and I'm going to listen, but
okay.
I'm not in a state of mind to participate in that podcast today.
Okay.
I'm going to ramble infinitely, and I'm going to start speak French and stuff like that.
Shut up, David.
What is it? What does he say?
It's not a booster, it's a Bowser. That's our friend David Scott. He likes to tell puns.
I don't get it. Is there a bad guy in Mario that's called Booster?
Bowser.
Yeah, but what?
It's not a good one. That's the thing.
Why Booster? What's the thing with Booster? It's just because
it sounds like Bowser.
It doesn't sound like Bowser at all. Booster, Bowser doesn't sound the same at all.
Well, that's why
my accent doesn't.
That's why I said like "shut up, David," as it were.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm leaving you so Nick can speak about what he came to speak about. And
yes, and yes. John, do you have it set up so that like anyone can share as well?
Possibly. That's not what I want.
So I'll be in the chat watching you and have a good show, babes. And I'm probably going to fall asleep in the middle of it. So see you next week.
Yep.
See you. Hey, John, I just noticed your cat is like slapping the floor with its tail. Does that mean that a cat's irritated?
Very often it does. In this case, I think it means that he is bored.
Yes.
Because,
man.
I think he came in here hoping to fuck with the dog. And the dog didn't want to play. So now instead he is lying on the stack of papers I have back there.
I imagine he's also thinking, oh, there goes the master talking to his imaginary friends again.
Yeah, he would never call me master.
No, you are his pets, as it were, or roommate at best. David, you're stop trying, Rouser. What the hell is that? Stop trying. It's just like, but anyway, so Nick Anderson, you found out something interesting about like a series that like people don't really know about, except for maybe in the UK. Bithrow probably is familiar with it. He's old enough. He's old as dirt, and from the UK. But most of us know it as Thomas the Tank Engine. But it was another series before that, wasn't it?
They don't even call it that. They call it Thomas the Train because they don't get that the thing pulling is not the train. The rolling stock is the train. The part at the front is called an engine or a locomotive. There I go, being autistic again.
Okay.
So look, there's the Thomas stuff, and then there's the Railway series, which most people don't know about. I've written some notes down just to keep this concise. Yeah, these books, they started out as just scribblings and notes by Reverend Wilbert Audrey. You know, he jotted them down for his kids during World War II. You know, they were sick with measles. He wanted to entertain them. So he made a few characters, you know, like Edward, Henry, Gordon, and he just, you know, threw it together, and his wife and her friends are like, hey, these are pretty good. You should try publishing them. I'm sure a lot of kids would love these. And he did. And then it just kind of spiraled out of control from there. Like within just a couple of years, like 2 books, it was already a massive success. And it just kept getting bigger. But what was really interesting about it is like it started out fairly kiddie, but he couldn't write them for kids. You know, he had to write them for the moms and pops and aunts and uncles and grandparents and even older siblings who would have to read these stories over and over and over again. So he couldn't let them be annoying to read. And over time, you see the books slowly like mature as they have to keep up with the times. Because
Thomas the Tank Engine develops a serious drinking problem. Thomas the Tank Engine gets herpes. Yeah, we know.
No, but I mean, like the series begins, you know, like in the 1910s. But once it eventually catches up to like the 1960s, well, then you have to address things like diesels replacing steam engines on British rail and around the world, and the start of like preservation efforts to keep them all from being scrapped. And that's where the books start getting really grim. You know, I had to like keep pace with things that were
Thomas
actually
the Tank
happening in
Engine
the real
wrestles
world.
with genocide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point is, it wasn't some abstract fantasy train world like Chuggington and all these other series where there's some vehicle with a face on it that talks. They all take place in some weird fantasy dimension where like everything's alive. It just bounces around. But the Railway series was our world. The only discernible difference between, that and this was that the vehicles had faces and could talk. And you'd think that would be a big difference, but surprisingly, it wasn't. It was very superficial. Like the way that people dressed, the way the humans were drawn, the way the scenery was drawn. It was all extremely realistic. And it just made it more fascinating. And eventually, like, the characters started talking more like normal people do in conversations. Like in the first few books, they were kind of flowery, but over time, it's like it grew up with the readers. So people were able to continue enjoying those books even into adulthood.
I'm glad you're enjoying this, Mithra. I figured that, like, if you were a rail enthusiast, I don't know if you you mentioned that or not, but like, I'm glad you are enjoying this. So you continue.
Okay, I'm just trying to see where I am in my notes. Oh, okay. So then eventually came time for the TV adaptation. There were a few attempts that all like bombed or were canceled or whatever. But when Britt Allcroft and her team decided to like film the whole thing with little model trains and the eyes could move and everything, that was, I think, in 1984. And that's when it just kind of snowballed and became ever more popular because it brought the Railway series to a new audience, to, Americans. But because of that, not that many people over here even know about the Railway series. In fact, I'm kind of going off track. So I'm just going to go
My
ahead
nephew loved it back when he was
I can imagine. The thing is, like, the show... Yeah, well, the show has gone through so many shifts over the years. It's had low points, it's had high points where they actually attempted pretty decently to try to recapture the spirit of the books, but then those eventually fell through. The thing that like made the books unique was that the engines, they couldn't move on their own. They weren't magic. They still needed crews of people. They still had to operate by like railway safety regulations. Like Audrey was a stickler for that. And all the accidents were based on things that actually happened on British railways and even some other railways. So it was so grounded in reality, it made it easy to imagine what it would be like to actually work on a railway, because the fact that they had faces and could talk was so inconsequential. And that just made it fascinating. I think that was a large part of its appeal. Was that
the tank engine gets slowly ground down by Margaret Thatcher?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, as I wrote down here, when it came time for the TV adaptation, Britt Allcroft did a pretty good job recreating the grounded feel of the books for a few seasons. Then that silly magical railroad movie happened, and any reputation the series had outside the fandom was destroyed. This was the beginning of the end, as Hair Entertainment completely revamped the series and made it clear this would no longer be a semi-respectable franchise that was okay for railroad enthusiasts and or their kids to enjoy. Thomas was now strictly for babies. That was their line in the sand. Since then, it's had its ups and downs, but mostly downs. A big part of this is down to Mattel. They're an awful toy company. Anytime one of their products starts to sell a little less, their instinct isn't to try to like improve the product. They just go, we'll just stop painting it, and then those sell worse. And so they just keep cutting out features and trying to spin it as better somehow. And basically, if you're older than like 3, like if you're old enough to be handed a toy and be able to tell that the piece of plastic crap in your hands is garbage, Mattel doesn't want you. That's why they don't want anybody older than that watching the show. They don't want anybody who knows better.
I can say that the TV show cartoon Young Justice had 2 great seasons, and there was a long gap between the second season finishing and third season being released, as all because it was the first 2 seasons was financed by Mattel, and they made the action figures, so the dolls for for it. But since the sales for adults were like not good, it's just like, why are we going to continue producing shows that like making us money like selling toys? So screw that. So it was a long time until like I think finally it was DC finally said, okay, the fans are demanding it, so we're going to like make more Young Justice, and finally they make Young Justice like 3 and Young Justice 4. And I'm gonna like also interject here. It's kind of interesting how you say that like Mattel, because it's not making much money, they just make cuts and cuts and cuts and cuts. And it's almost like kind of like how like the conservatives actively do to like any kind of like a social welfare program. They make cuts to the welfare program, and then they'll say like, oh look, this welfare program is not doing as any good as is like not fulfilling its promises. We're going to cut the program entirely as austerity. And it's kind of like interesting how that's also happening in the business world with Mattel. But you can
it's like if you want your toys to sell, then invest in them, make them actually worth buying, instead of trying to like narrow the amount of like kids who would even appeal to.
Yeah.
Anyway,
just proving that Henry Ford, in addition to being a racist and anti-Semite, was a dumbass. Make the highest quality of good possible, paying the lowest price possible, paying the highest wages possible. Yes,
so
no, that's
here's
not
the
ever
darndest. So here's the darndest thing. It worked. Mattel won. This whole rebranding campaign worked. Now, if you say, yeah, I like the Railway series, most people don't know what you're talking about. They've never even heard of the late Reverend's books, but everyone's heard of the show, which is just a cartoon now. Now it's like, oh, you're an adult who's into Thomas? Pedophile. It's like, oh, okay. With most series, most franchises, you can say, so what? The old media's still there. The show can't ruin the books. But this is kind of a special case where the new media, the show did affect the book's development to a degree. There were about 40, but Wilbur Awdry himself only wrote the first 26. The last dozen or so were written by his son, Christopher Awdry. And I got to hand it to the guy. He did a good job trying to continue his father's work, even like after the old man had died. He kept the grounded setting and continuity, and his stories like branched into the 70s, 80s, even 90s. And like even though Chris's stories were like a little more tame, he did a good job. But as the show just became like more and more of a toy commercial and sold like ever more toys, he was continuously pressured to make the books more like the show, to dumb it down and have more stories about Thomas. See, that's the biggest difference right there. You notice the books are called the Railway series. You don't even have like any of the characters' names, because it's not about any one of them. It's about an ensemble cast. It's to show what it's like working on a railway, just from the perspective of the locomotives themselves. But of course, like with a TV show, you want to have that one simple, iconic character that kids can latch onto. So they chose him, and since then, there was it got to a point where he was appearing in every single episode, even if it was just to like meet a new character that was only gonna be there for like one episode to sell another toy. And it got worse because like the first few seasons, they tried to follow the Reverend stories to a degree. But then once they ran out of stories that they thought they could make good toys out of the characters, they started making their own. And for a little while, actually did a decent job like maintaining the atmosphere. But it got to a point where the writing just got awful. And there were a few years there where every single episode is just the same damn story. It's like, oh, the engines, they're enjoying themselves. And then the Fat Controller tells them to do a job. And then they make a mistake 3 times and they have to apologize for it. That became every single episode with a 3 strikes formula. These weren't even stories anymore. It was a story. And it got infuriating. And I really think this is what just destroyed the series' reputation, to the point where most people they'll never know about its, deeper elements. Like, there's a story in the books, and it gets really good once they hit like the 60s, where Gordon, he suffers severe depression because he learns that all of his siblings are dead.
All the other trains being decommissioned is the word. Yeah. Thomas the Dank meme is the word. It's kind of like not like a dank, but dark, as it were.
Thomas,
they didn't touch It's like they didn't touch upon that in the TV show. He actually did have one surviving sibling, and it was a real engine called the Flying Scotsman, which is still performing to this day. I think it just went through its latest overhaul, and they just put it back to work. So it's one that looks almost exactly like him. And that guy was like brought to the railway for a couple of months just to like cheer him up. And you just have these great scenes of these two brothers, these two now like aging men just catching up and reminiscing about all the things they've lost, all the faces that have gone. You would never see that in the TV series. It's where it gets a little too real for them. Yeah, there was one where they talk about like mountain engines, the kinds that have like a third rail that looks like a zipper, and they have this special gear shaped wheel that helps them climb up gradients that no other could. And there's a story where like one of them isn't looking at the track as he goes down. He ends up going off the rails, tumbling down a mountainside. He's a wreck, and they just couldn't fix him. So they took them apart and cannibalized all his pieces to fix the other engines. That's really dark. And even in
Thomas
the
the
story,
Frankenstein zombie.
Yes.
and even in the story, they had to mention, the narration. Oh, you never mentioned that Cody made the whole thing up, but it is based on a real thing that actually happened on the Snowdon Railway in, I think, Switzerland. Unless I'm getting that wrong.
No,
anyway.
Snowdon's in Russia.
Definitely Snowdon.
Not that one. So anyway, they kept pushing, make more stories about Thomas, make more books about these characters, younger characters, make them more funny, etc., etc. And for a decade, Chris managed to release a book every single year, just like his old man did. But then it got to this critical mass where suddenly, I don't know everything about this, but for a while, he would only release a book every 5 or 6 years. So there was a whole decade of almost nothing. And I think it's because he and the producers of the show were fighting over the rights to the series. Like they were trying to stop them from making any more books. And I imagine the guy was, losing steam himself, that he was getting yeah. So here's one of the most fascinating things. Here's how real these characters are in a way. In the books themselves, Reverend Audrey is a character. The engines just call him the Thin Clergyman, but the idea is that he goes there and he interviews the engines and their crews, and he writes the books based on that. The idea being that these are real characters in some other place, and all these books are just based on them, and maybe tweaked slightly to be more kid-friendly, as if even then we don't have the whole story. And the funny thing is, like, as the rest of the world goes through this shift where steam is effectively abolished, and you just have this one railway where they're still running, still in service to this day, it's implied that it was his books that made those characters famous and allowed them to keep working, that allowed them to live. And that if he hadn't written those books, they would have closed down decades ago. And so it gets to a point where in 2011, Christopher released his last book. And this one has a beautiful ending where a bust of his late father is erected at one of the fictional railway stations. It's like been 100 years since the man was born. And of course, he was long dead by that point. But yeah, they erect a bust of him. And I think even the Prince of Wales that comes to the railway and says, my parents, they read me these books when I was little, and he like congratulates them all and says there's no other railway like it. And the engines, they basically just honor the man who made them famous. That is beautiful. Just as a tribute from a son to his father, who like made all these stories for him as a little boy when he was sick with measles. That's beautiful. That is just about the purest thing I've seen in some time. And they beat that passion out of him. It's like at least he got to end it on a nice note, the way he wanted. But it still makes you wonder, like, that was released in 2011. These characters were still performing just as like smart devices were taking over society. And it makes you wonder, if it was still going, what kind of stories they could tell now. Like, how would they cope with a pandemic? How would they protect their passengers? What if like train spotters started like, cutting a little close with like their drones and like causing accidents? It's just so fascinating. The idea of these characters, many of which are like over 100 years old at this point, still in service, and what they would make of this strange modern world that they're in now.
Yeah, exactly. Because like people, well, also people are still using trains, and actually some are advocating for like on like climate change or fossil fuel use. It's like use high speed trains. We don't got that in America. Rage increasing because of car companies and other companies. Like
America is the country of the car.
Yes, exactly. But also it's just like but then like it's weird. Months ago actually, when I was like the political stream, I've just read something that's all. But then afterwards, I switched over to playing Stardew Valley, and like on my gaming streams, it's like you can ask me anything. One person was just really like they talking to me about like socialism and communism. This person against it, and I brought up an example about like, well, look at the British railway systems when they got privatized. The system turned to shit. But this person's like, oh no, I'm not in favor of the government running the railway series, the railway systems. Like, I don't understand.
They used to be good, now they're bad, but you're against it because reasons.
I just want to point out, Data Portdoll said, they said the railway series has actual disability representation, so that's bitchin'. Yeah, the character Henry, he was disabled for a long time because he wasn't an engine that was even supposed to exist. You see, for the first few books, it was difficult to get the illustrations right. Audrey didn't like draw them himself. So he had other artists do it. And a few artists, they just couldn't draw Henry right. They kept getting his build like mixed up, and Audrey was just like pulling his hair out. And it got to a point where the character was so sickly and could barely even perform. You could see he was getting ready to like write him out of the series. Maybe not have him die, but just, have him out of the way, not have to write about him anymore. But he got all these letters from kids saying that they loved Henry and they wanted to see him get better, that they wanted to see him thrive. And so he's like, okay, all right, I'll take a second crack at this. And he was able to come up with this whole interesting, deep, realistic backstory for how this character exists. So apparently, like Sir Nigel Gresley, the guy who built like the A1 Pacific, that's Gordon's build, who built like Gordon and all his siblings, who designed them, drew them down. A spy from like a competing company got into like his office and just grabbed all the papers, all the plans that he could, and not realizing that he was stealing rejected plans for like a failed design, and ended up selling that to competitors. This design was kind of like Gordon, but it had a tiny firebox, which are basically an engine's lungs. Yes. So it could barely breathe. And they ended up making Henry, and he was like this weird counterfeit design. And then the Fat Controller.
So he was asthmatic.
So they then called a Fat Director. He needed a big, strong, like heavy goods engine. And he purchased Henry, thinking that he was getting a better one. And then what do you know? The poor thing can barely even move some days. And you won't see this like in the books themselves. But there's a special extra book called like Sodor, Its History, People, and Railways that tackles this all as realistically as can be, that has like actual dates for when each engine was brought to the island, whether it was during like World War I and some mix-up or World War II or whatever. And in Henry's case, the director was quoted as saying like, I wanted an Atlantic and that son of a bitch sent me that.
Sifia, about electrical power from solar panels for a steam engine. Probably not, unless the entire train, where even then, I mean, batteries are incredibly heavy and solar power it doesn't have enough throughput. It would be charging all the time in order to move like 5 miles. I don't think that could work.
So for a time, they were able to help Henry by getting Welsh coal, which is this really high quality stuff. The other engines, they could get by with like stuff that's just okay, but poor Henry, he needed this special kind. And it was expensive to have to import, but they're like, it's worth it, he deserves a chance. And they had like this special bunker that was labeled like for Henry only. Like no one else is allowed to use this. It was like he got an inhaler, basically. That was like his medication. And for a time, he was able to run pretty well. He was actually getting better. And then one day he, during the winter time, some points were frozen. They couldn't they were jammed. So he got redirected onto another siding and crashed into another train. It was one of the first crashes in the series. It was pretty bad. And he was so messed up that you know what, you're kind of due for an overhaul anyway. We're gonna send you to Crew, which is a real place, and they're gonna fix you up. They're gonna make you stronger than ever. So they end up like rebuilding Henry from front to back into a Black 5, which is a much stronger type of engine. And from that day forward, it was like smooth sailing for him. So I don't quite know how to feel about that. That you had this character that was disabled but was coping, and then was like reborn to not be disabled, but whatever. It was just nice to see the guy thriving. It's just like he stuck it out. You know, he's anyway. One of the last stories that Woodward ever wrote about the guy, he ended up having to save two diesels who had both broken down in some way, pull their trains while he himself had a failed regulator and wasn't quite safe to run. But, you know, someone had to help. And this was based on a real thing that actually happened, where one steam engine had to move two diesels and their entire trains. That was one of the last stories ever written about Henry. And they never adapted it for the TV series. You know why? Because they didn't have the budget to make character models of the two diesels that he had to rescue. So Henry's finest hour, the last story that was focused on him, where he shows everybody what he's made of, like what a Chad, we never got to see that.
What could have been? Yeah, but as you said, like the producers of the show, Thomas the Tank Engine, was like fighting with the author of the Railway series books, as it were, for rights, as it were, because like it's the producer of the TV show that wanted to like make more toys and like that kind of like marketing. It reminds me of how I talked to Groundhog about this like before a bunch of times. Because in music, it's definitely like the producers will like the hammer on at the like artists, like, no, you got to make us a hit. You got to make us a hit. We don't care if it's art crap makes us a hit. Like in the song "Creep," it's the most popular song by Radiohead. But if you talk to Radiohead themselves and the fans of Radiohead, they're like, but this Creep is not their best song, as were. So you know that that's actually one of the guitarists like strummed the guitar so hard that he breaks the guitar, so he didn't have to play the song in the recording, as it were, because he hated that song so much, as it were. It just ironically became one of the most iconic guitar riffs in like rock music history. But
you know, there's so many stories though that were pretty touching, like the two Scottish twins, you know, Donald and Douglas, when they came to the island, they only bought one, but the twins, they knew that whichever was left behind in Scotland would be scrapped. You know, it was like a death sentence. So they both came, and they lost, you know, accidentally their numbers, so no one could tell them apart. And
protecting each other,
and it's like, all right, all right, you don't.
I only want to adopt one of the twins. The other one will die.
It was just it's like, no, I'm sending the other back to Scotland. Like, I will figure out who's who. Like it was even like, okay, you don't have your numbers. What are your names? Oh, I'm Donald and he's Dougie, and he's like, all right, so who's and he's like, oh, well, you see, we only just gave each other these names on the way here. And they were just being really obstinate. They were looking out for each other. Yeah. And so for like a whole year, they're like, all right, I'm going to figure out who to send back. So the brothers, they had to be really careful for each one not to perform better than the other. Yes. They didn't want to make it too easy to decide which one to send away to his death. So it's like anytime one, like, you know, was like having trouble, the other would like try to help them out and so on. And it was just really sweet seeing these two brothers, you know, look after each other. And eventually, like after the winter time, like the other engines grew so attached to the pair that they essentially went on strike to keep them both.
Nice.
Good solidarity.
Yes, work of solidarity. That's always important. Another example that I have of like a record producers deciding to basically demanding the money over art is the band Warren. They're serious about their music, as were, but the record producers was like, no, we gotta have a hit, we gotta have a hit, we gotta have a hit. And so they finally said, like, okay, finally, here's your hit, and it's probably one of their worst songs, Cherry Pie. That's the only song that everyone knows about. And all the members of the band of Warren hate that song. And absolutely, even though catchy and hooky, which is what proper music needs to do. There's got to be the hook in there. I can understand them hating that song. I like the song, but it's more of ironic sort of thing. Yeah, but that's kind of like a fascinating these. So I would be interested in this kind of like a show or series that has like these dark themes to it, because like when you actually humanize something that we use all the time, we don't think about it that much of like, oh, this train is not good anymore, so let's dismantle it. But when there's actually is sentient and we interact with it, that's where you just like start to like you give more sympathy and have to like think about your own a lot.
That's probably the one thing about the books that I do consider very unrealistic, is that these things do have faces and do talk, and we treat them very utilitarian. We're just like, oh, you're not going to work? Okay, we'll just seal you in this tunnel for however long it takes you to learn your lesson, or we'll take you to pieces and use you to fix the others. It's very, very grim. And look at how we actually treat things. Like, we treat other humans like crap, yes. But look at how we treat our pets. Look at like people will slap googly eyes on a Roomba and talk to it like it's their cat. So we can't help projecting our humanity, our sapience onto other, non-human things. So if engines actually did have faces and could talk and were people in a way, I think there would be a much stronger effort to preserve them. Just because people wouldn't be able to help like empathizing with them. And you would even have like people who are like, oh, I've known Henry since I was a kid. He's like one of my lifelong friends. I think it's unrealistic that they would just be willing to like throw them away like that, But another story that was kind of interesting is there was this character named Duke who was like a very old engine. Worked in this old mining town that like their economy collapsed. So all of the engines of rolling stock were bought off by other like neighboring railways. And the other engines, they all got bought, but nobody wanted Duke because he was too old. And he got his name because he was owned by a duke, who like lived on the island. And when he was like stashed away, in the shed, he's like, oh well, I'll just close my eyes, I guess it'll help pass the time. And he ended up sleeping for decades, only like waking up on occasion and go like, where's his grace? It's not like him to forget about me, because he didn't realize that his grace, the real duke, was killed in World War II, killed by German soldiers. And that's why, and then the duke, the real duke, he never told anybody that he had this engine somewhere. He never told his son about it. So that's why the engine duke was just forgotten about for like 20 years. But eventually, the other engines who had known him started spreading stories about the guy, and they eventually made it to the son of, the old human duke. He's like, all right, let's go find him. He's still buried out there somewhere. And it was one of the best stories in the whole series, where you have like the controllers of all these railways working together, looking at old maps where the rails were ripped up, trying to like find their way of the guy, because like a whole mountainside had formed over the shed by this point. And the author, Reverend Audrey, as the character, the thin clergyman, joined them on this search. And a buddy of his ended up like standing atop the shed, falling through the roof on the guy. And then Duke's just like, excuse me, are you a vandal? Driver says vandals break in and smash things. And he's like, no, we're here to rescue you. And it's so wholesome, but full of existential dread.
Yeah. Groundhog Quinten says in chat that the people operating the trains have a connection to them and empathize with their trains, but then despite the love for them, we in some cases just bury them instead of preserving them.
Well, the thing is, like in the case of Duke, there was no preservation effort at the time. That wasn't a thing that happened yet. It wouldn't happen for a couple more decades, but they didn't want him to just be scrapped. So it's like, okay, look, we'll put a tarp over you. We'll seal you up in the shed, and hopefully you'll be okay until we can come back and get you. And then that never happened. That was the best they could do for a time. Things would certainly be different nowadays. But one of the weirdest things is there is a lot of racism, or at least like prejudice, between the steam engines and diesels, because it's like we can't help always building a better, stronger, cheaper version of something. And I like to think that as these characters were being built their crews would tell them, oh, you're the best things in sliced bread. You're going to make us so much money. And they were essentially groomed to think, oh, yeah, I am the greatest thing. All those other engines are pieces of crap. So you would have scenes like where a diesel would come in and look at the steam engine and go like, not bad. At least you're all clean. I've seen worse. And they're just like, excuse me? Like, what did he say? And it'd just be like, it's not your fault, but you're so out of date. Your controller should scrap you and replace you all with engines like me. A fill of oil, a touch on the starter, and I'm off. No bother, no waiting. They have to fuss around you lot for hours before you're ready to work.
And you do smell different.
But that's the thing, is they would just roll in and effectively hurl like slurs and death threats at the older ones. This series is a trip.
Yeah, exactly. It's just thinking of like how people said like, oh, you're just like dirty and we're more clean and stuff like that. Oh my God, people have been saying that about other people for a long time. And someone said that recently. Actually, it was like the defense attorney in the killers of the Ahmaud Arbery case. She said that like Ahmaud Arbery has like dirty nails and something like that. It's just like, could you not? It's like
there's even a point in one of Christopher Audrey's, again, the son who like continued the stories. There's one where a diesel is like visibly really disgusted. I don't mean he's just like putting on an act. I mean he literally is like, oh, what is with these old objects? He actually calls them objects. I'm like, so look, what I'm saying is this series goes much deeper than the TV series ever did. And if your entire frame of reference for this is Thomas the Tank Engine, which is just awful, has been awful for most of its run. Ugh. But you know what I think is tragic is what's been lost for neurodivergent kids. This is a little something that I also wrote down. Actually, oh wait, I'm sorry. I lost my
you are going on timeout for that one, David.
Okay.
Conversation about manga.
Hey, okay. Anyway, look, just before I forget, I can't help thinking Chris was probably disillusioned by the world, effectively rejecting his father's vision. Barely anyone was reading the books anymore, and the TV series is like its own thing. It's like what's the point? But what I don't get is why can't we have both? Look at a series like Transformers, where any given moment you'll have like 7 different series running at once. And they're all made for different age demographics, different like parts of the fandoms. You have some that are made for little kids, and then you have some that are just made for nostalgic adults or edgy adults or edgy teenagers. And I know that Thomas isn't going to have that kind of range, but like, can we at least have like 2 versions of it? Just have what they're doing now for the little kids as a toy commercial, and then have a more faithful, realistic alternative that feels more like the books and can run at the same time for the 12-year-olds in the demographic. Or nostalgic old fogies. Why can't they do that? But again, that's where Mattel drew their line in the sand. Like, no, we don't want anybody looking at this except for 4-year-olds.
Yeah, exactly. And they own the rights to the television rights of the property too. So it's like they decide, and it's like, oh yeah. And as an anime fan, I can get a whole thing about like property rights and all this stuff.
How they keep like alienating everyone and just pandering ever harder to that shrinking otaku demographic.
Oh yeah, which is like what a lot of anime companies in Japan are doing now, as we're because what they guaranteed like guaranteed in return on investment. But that reminds me, is like, yeah, you're right, absolutely. The franchise of like Transformers is large enough and big enough that you can have specific shows for specific demographics. The one for little kids is like a Rescue Bots, as well. I only know about this because the voice actor. Damn it, I forgot his name. He does the voice of Albert Wesker in the Resident Evil video games, the recent ones. But he also voiced one of the like the cop patrol vehicle in Rescue Bots. Yeah, there's cops in the like show, blah. Anyway, but they also have like fire truckers as well. And I see similarities in the Guerrero series and the Rescue Bots as well, because they're just like vehicles that we see in our everyday lives, the patrol cop, but also a firefighter truck, ambulance as were, and like they're just like they perform those tasks as like those vehicles as were, but they also are transformers, and so they're sentient beings as well. So you can see how it's just like, again, we like we were saying in the chat too, it's like people, we can tend to empathize with like our our cars. People name their cars, and people name their boats too.
I always call them she.
Yes, Captain Kirk says his first love will always be the Enterprise.
Alas, my ship, whom I love, like a woman, is lost.
Is even on like Orange County Choppers or like the American Choppers. That was the name of the TV show on like Discovery. Even some of the customers or the fabricators, the builders of the bikes would like also see the bikes as a woman, because like there's the gas tank of the bus, as it were, and then there's like the real of like the hips, as it were, and it's kind of like well, hey, if you love your bike, and so long as everyone's consenting, I'm not going to judge anyone. No, that's the thing. Radio. Go ahead.
I just want to point out, Mithra said the Thomas books gave some really valuable life lessons, and there's more than people would give it credit for. I have seen so many articles in recent years. It's like every Christmas time they roll around, people going like the authoritarian, oppressive soul of Thomas the imperialist engine, because it like teaches kids to worship grimy industrialization and to always want to bow before authority figures that's a top of hat in their own life. It's all just silly. They basically think that, these books are just telling kids to always obey authority figures, always do as you're told, blah, 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 blah. And I've even seen people go like, I just don't understand how a staunch progressive liberal like George Carlin could narrate these stories that stand against everything he stood for. All these crocodile tears.
Well, to be fair, Thomas is totally a bottom.
No, that is the fun thing about Thomas. Like, he's too nice in the TV show. In the books, he's a cheeky little bastard. He's not terribly bright. He always wants to like impress everybody. He thinks he's hot shit, and he ends up messing up now and then. Like there was one story where he attempted to drive himself, because he was like doing such a good job. He was running so smoothly that his driver jokingly said, "You could almost run this line without me." And he's like, And then one day he actually attempted it after a firelighter had been fiddling with his controls and like left a gear, so it's like he wasn't parked effectively. And then once he started, he realized he couldn't stop, and he crashed right into the side of a station master's house just as the family was having breakfast. He's like right there at the table. He could have run them over. It's like, Jesus, this is really bad.
Thomas.
They were pretty upset at him, but some of the lessons really were mature, because like even into the Christopher Audrey era, like Gordon, the big blue express engine, he had been running for about 88 years. And over the decades, the trains got longer and heavier, the timetables were more as and as like other more high-speed trains
stop
kept
sexualizing
coming along,
this, Nick. God.
as other like more modern engines kept coming by and like creating this pressure, he eventually couldn't keep up, and he realized, you know what, I've been doing this for almost 90 years. I'm an old man now. I've had a good run. So he effectively like stepped aside and retired, if you will, to let somebody else take over. And from then on, he just pulled like slow passengers and good trains in the countryside, and he was perfectly fine with that. That is very mature. And of course, the TV series would never do that, because they want each character to have like the one trait. And Gordon's trait is that he is proud to be an express engine. They never want to evolve them beyond that. It's a little too real for their magical fantasy train world where nothing matters.
I always like to say, no. Kids shows can't have multi-redemption characters. So it's like, oh wait, this is not kids show. This is 4-year-old shows. It's just like, okay. Those 4-year-olds can still like those like shows with like the multi-dimensional characters as well. But you can continue.
I just want to point out, Data Portdal said, it's a little overreaction, although it's impossible to deny how much kids media has infallible authority figures. I will say yes. However,
Autobots and Decepticons are basically just two fascist empires fighting each other.
True.
I want to say though, in the Railway series case, it's kind of interesting because there have been, many generations of controllers. And the first one was written as this oafish, parody of like, oh, my doctor has ordered me not to pull, just this lazy guy who is kind of a joke. and that was the joke. That the guy like in charge of all this was kind of a git himself. But over time, you know, as his son took over and then his son took over and so on, you see like the values change with each generation until like the later generations do take things like railway preservation more seriously and do appreciate the engines as more than just glorified mechanical pack mules. And I just find that interesting. And that's another thing that would never happen in the TV series because it's always just the one guy who presented there as infallible because they don't want to acknowledge the passage of time. You may have seen a trend with like all the good stuff that keeps getting left out.
They're more nuanced. They're more like darker. They're more it's like they're more difficult like themes for like that like 4-year-olds would like have trouble understanding.
I just saw that I can't unsee Captain Tiny Arm and his baby sidekick Mega Hand. It's amazing. Oh man. You know what though? I almost considered writing some fan fiction that would like try to also stay in the vein of the books. Like I almost had I was this close to writing one where Thomas came to America effectively on a tour to like take advantage of all the publicity and all the fame, you know, built around the character, and also just to meet some of his American fans. And I would have had him face very American problems, like while he's asleep, you know, some teens come along and spray graffiti all over him. Or maybe he's like going under a bridge and he sees some adults there and they look like they're excited to see him. They look like they're waving. He's like, oh, this is great. And then they start chucking paint cans and eggs and stuff at him and saying like, take your fascism back to Britain, you blimey bastard. And the idea being that these were all parents of little kids who were obsessed with Thomas the Tank Engine and were very frustrated. And when the real guy was there, they just had to take it out on him. That was something I almost wrote just for fun, just to be indulgent, if you will.
No, that's a like a fascinating one. Take as it were.
But there is just one last thing I want to touch upon, and it's what's been lost for neurodivergent kids over the years. Because nowadays it's so fast paced, so flashy and zany. Yeah, it's just trying to be Paw Patrol. Everything wants to be Paw Patrol now, and they'll say, "Well, we've looked at focus groups, and from the 12 kids we looked at, this is what they want. This is what they like." But they're leaving so many other kids out to dry. So here's what there's a reason it's such a stereotype that autistic people are obsessed with trains. It's because an entire generation of
David! That's a good one, but yes, David. I'm sorry.
Huh? Wait, what?
Stop trying to derail things, geek.
All right. Well, I'm completely lost. Okay. All right. So it's because an entire generation of autistic people grew up with the early seasons of the show and then the books, and they really helped our development. You know, the static carved faces, lingering camera, and smooth narration. It taught kids like me what facial expressions are. And so, you know, I was able to look at a character like Thomas or James or whoever, and I was able to eventually tell, oh, that means he's sad. Oh, that means he's angry. You know, whereas like any adult explaining to me in person, just it wouldn't sink in. It's just difficult for us to understand things like that. But the show helped. And, you know, the pacing back when they were only like 4.5 minutes long and the stories themselves were pretty short, it was concise, but laid back. It was very direct. It didn't talk down to us. It was digestible for kids who were easily overstimulated, like me. It was perfect for autistic kids. And now the show's getting angry letters and emails from parents because even until recently, this was like the one thing their kids could watch without getting overloaded and having a meltdown. Now that it's just as flashy, loud, and aggressively in your face as every other toy commercial competing for parents' money, what are those kids supposed to watch? Caillou? I'm actually noticing this with a lot of media, even grown-up stuff. I can easily watch older generations of Star Trek, but everything past and including the Abrams films, I have to watch in short bursts, wearing glasses or squinting my eyes a lot of the time. I still like it, but on a sensory level, I can only handle so much new Trek in one sitting.
Yeah. I have like my former coworker who is also a conservative. So when we talk political, because as I tend to do, that was an interesting conversation. But he has like autistic children, and so when he wanted to go see or show them the Lego Movie, as it were, which is a great movie, but for someone who's like autistic, as it were, he had to like find the theater that was showing the like a less stimulated version of that movie, as where all the visuals are like toned down. And I agree for accessibility things, it's like because there's like some people, it's like some things it's like great and all, and like for like the Lego Movie and other properties or Star Wars or like the scene is so dense, it's a word, that stupid producer. It's there needs to be like options as where to be able to tone them down too, or like even in video games, a lot of accessibility options. If like not only it's like content warnings for things that are triggering, or but also accessible options for like people whose like hands are not as good for the quick time, so the quick events as it were, just be able option to either skip them or like they're not intense. Even like a difficult game like Celeste, that's where a super difficult game, that game does still give you options in order to like, okay, let's make this easier on you, because like that developer of that game, Celeste, wants people to go on that journey in order to like make it to the top of the mountain tour, as opposed to say like, I guess the developer of like Dark Souls or like or from Software, they were just like, no, we want you to play specifically this pattern is the word. Otherwise, good luck to you, or hope you grind them enough to like, you find that difficult to like do the parries. So well, toughen up.
It's funny.
Jokes.
About a decade ago, they almost did exactly what I was recommending, where they were going to branch out. They were going to diversify and have the toddler version and an older version. Shane Acker, I think, was helping make he was like brought aboard, if you will, to make a Thomas movie that would have been more realistic, where they wouldn't look like toys. They would be like really detailed and look exactly like the real life engines those characters were based on, or at least inspired by. And they look with all the rivets and the valves and the pipes, all those little details. And it would have taken place during World War II. And it would have been about like some kid and his dad or something, and they would have like met Thomas and all that. And it looked like it was going to be really nice, at least as an experiment. It looked like they were going to try to branch out into an older demographic and maybe have like, model locomotives that were more detailed and realistic and all that for that crowd. And then Mattel said, no.
That would cost money.
So it's like that was like their last ditch effort to try to make this something more than what it was turning into. And Mattel, they just grabbed like a rolled up newspaper. We're like, no, bad dog.
What could have been if Capleton didn't get away, and Mattel does own Wizards of the Coast too, and so a lot of like gamers have their complaints about like what like Wizards of the Coast has done with like a D&D. So like the divisive issues about that and as Magic the Gathering, a card game I love. I still have some of my decks around my desk, as it were, have $10,000 worth of like Magic the Gathering cards right in this apartment and just this room. However, what they've done recently is that like they have now tie-ins. There is like a special card you have to like get from a special pack from like local stores and work. That's good to promote to help out the local game stores as it were. But it is a limited edition like Walking Dead is a Walking Dead character in Magic the Gathering, and I've seen this discussion in like the serious spike professional competitive like players as were. What's like the Wizards Coast doing? It's like, well, Mattel's telling them to do that because like they want that thing to sell, and of course they need to increase the quarterly profit margins. And they were just like wondering, it's like, should we still support their Wizards Coast and what they're doing if they're doing that? Because like if this like the character from Walking Dead card is actually really good competitive play, something like that, then that the price for this on the secondhand market is going to jack up. So this is going to be the next $40 card that everyone has to need a full play set of in their decks as well. And now it's going to drive up most of the casual players as well, which they honestly do know that like it's the casuals that kind of like feed into the money pool of like competitive play back to the gatherings were, which is also how like poker players think about like casual players too, the fish as it were. Then there's a lot of Magic Gathering players, there's also poker players, there's a lot of poker players, also Magic Gathering players because competitive play as it were. And so it's kind of like, yeah, Mattel's just like trying to do things and make money is how I only see it. Like the focus groups other thing. Kevin Smith, like a director, like explains his experience of like a focus group. Is like they get for his movie. It's like, what do you like about the movie? What do you don't like about the movie? Tell us why. They got all that information and they gave it to the director and said, do it better. And
you know what? There's one last thing I want to bring up. Is something that Mytho just brought up. Is that also near me is a restored railway that has a running Thomas. People, not just kids, love it. You know what? That was another thing that I considered for my Thomas Goes to America for a Year story, where his last couple of months here, he would just be running at one of these like restored, like heritage railways. And I started to think, well, hang on. These places where it's like a day out with Thomas, where they'll find an engine that looks close enough, they'll paint a blue, slap a face on it that made of plaster, and it's enough to like fool the kids into thinking, it's the same thing. I figure like in this universe where they're all actually alive, actually characters, that these lookalikes would be performers. They'd be like actors, because like what else do you call that? And in this case, he meets one, and she is not happy to meet him. She actually deeply resents him because for decades, she has not been able to be her own person, if you will. Her job has been to impersonate him, repeat all his catchphrases thousands of times, to act like she's him. She's never had like an identity, a livery, not even a name of her own, just the serial number. And so because of that, she really doesn't like him. And I figured, by the end, they would probably make peace, and he would be able to convince her handlers to, give her own livery and name and all that. And she would be named something like Julia. And then I realized, oh my God, did I just write like a trans metaphor into a Railway series fanfic?
You did.
God, they're sneaking in everywhere.
It just works out.
It does. A lot of our friends in the chat, they're like, hey, SJ, been a long time since we seen you. How you doing? Our trans themselves, Groundhog, Tavi, Jordan B, Daily Poor Doll, so they can, Lucidia, the Free Council, so they can tell you if it's off note, but we have previous conversations before about that. It's like, actually, no, you, like, when you accidentally done it, it turned out all right, actually were. And Groundhog says, I suddenly really want this story as Worm. And George B. complained, it's like, yes, you did, Nick. You did. And you did a good job with it.
I swear, every time I write a trans character into one of my stories, it's by complete accident. They're not premeditated. It's not me like checking boxes off a list. It just works out. And that's like my favorite way to write, more diverse characters like that. Is it just, I'm not even saying that it makes sense for them to be there makes it sound like it needs to be justified somehow. No, I just mean like I'm just saying they work.
Wait, it's all trans motor first? Always has
been. Trains are trans. You can give them the train flag.
Is it any wonder like so many trans people love Transformers? It's in the name. Like, well, wouldn't it be nice
more
to
than meets
like,
the eye?
wouldn't it be nice to change yourself into something else? Like, I even worked that into a Transformers fanfic I made that took place millions of years in the future, where humans aren't around anymore, and they all turn into weird futuristic animals that obviously haven't evolved yet. That was funky and fun. But I had this one character who was like the closest we had to a main character, who turned into a Delphimimus, which is like a future squid that looks like a whale, looks like a dolphin, to like, just changing its shape. So that's her beast mode. And she really doesn't like it because she isn't useful on land. She's very restrictive. She doesn't even like being in the water that much. And eventually my fans coined the term Mode Dysphoria. So there you go. There's another character who wishes to be something else, who wants to, basically turn into a different animal. And I don't know why it's like, yes, it's all trans metaphors.
It's trains all the way down.
Of course, and there because ain't nothing like a train. So I don't know I don't have any other thoughts about the topic or the discussion as we're something I wanted to mention and bring up is news related, totally off topic. And so if no one minds, so if everyone else is done with their train of thought.
I've said about everything I wanted to say. John Brockman, I hope that this paints a clearer, broader picture that while what you've seen is very boring, you have only seen the worst that this franchise has to offer.
Yes.
Because it has been made that way by design.
And I got to say, when I titled the episode, it absolutely was not talking about the fact that the Thomas the Train books are a lot better than the show. That was a reference
to the Railway series. Get it right.
It was a reference to the tornadoes that swept through the Southeast. And everybody's talking about, but the Bible's okay. Your sister died, but the Bible's okay.
Of course, there were some people that were doing that.
This tornado came through and ripped the roof off the church, but the hymnals were untouched. But it worked out perfectly well to talk about Thomas the Train versus the Railway series.
People died for candles.
Yes, because that's what's in the news. Because I'm not surprised by Amazon, because we all know Amazon shit. It was a little surprising about the candle factory, but I mentioned this last night on Necronomicon's stream where we were just playing golf with her friends, but we brought up the top because Necronomicon's went to grad school and studied meteorology, and so that's her special interest in what she did her grad school thesis on. And so she talked a lot about the tornadoes that happened, and yes, is we have had tornadoes in December before, because there's usually F1s. This is where it's just okay, it's a windy, blowy day, something like that. You can actually get tornadoes here in Washington State. You should start out in the ocean as a water spout, but then usually dies off once it gets to the sand or the beaches, as it were, and then it dies because the tornadoes happening in Washington State do happen, but it's very rare. But it does happen in over the Midwest, as we're usually around March and April, because that's where the mixture of the warm air and the cold air collide, as it were. But having a F5 tornado in December, as it were, one as devastating as this was, at least I don't know the death toll as it were happening, but I think Biden did issue a FEMA for emergency responses were. Yeah, the only reason we're getting this yes, fuck capitalism in general, but especially endangering workers for not following basic safety protocols. Yes, that's the people at the Canada factory and people at Amazon did heard about the tornado warnings, or it's to train and watch. Necronomicon went over the differences. A tornado watch is watch out for tornadoes and hunker down, bunker down, go out there and stuff like that.
If they threaten to fire you if you leave, just leave. They don't value your life. One of my favorite stories of this kind of thing is when the World Trade Center was about to come down. These two people, they were married, and the wife was on a lower floor, and all of her people got down very quickly. But the husband was on an upper floor, and everyone on that floor was ordered to stay. And they were talking on their phones. And she could see, from outside, this was coming down soon. And she's like, if you don't come out, I will divorce you. And that got him racing down the stairs. And, what do you know? Everybody who stayed on that floor died, and he's the only one who made it out. But that's what it comes down to. These companies, if they have to kill you, they will.
Okay, so Groundhog corrected me, is tornado watch, where it's if you hear tornado watch, is that's where it's you have time to prepare in case it come near you, something like that. But if it's tornado warning, it's just you're on your own.
Put your head between your knees and kiss your ass goodbye.
Yes, is where so people at the Canada factory and at Amazon did get the tornado watch, but we're told to stay to continue to, because we got to get these products out now. And this is what I've been hearing from my company a lot too, all the time, because I work in production, as it were, in manufacturing, and because the supply chain issues and there's all that sort of things, and because we need to ship more and more parts because capitalism needs exponential growth, so we're going to
build bigger shipping containers and shipping boats as were, and it's going to like get grounded onto the Suez Canal like it did this past year. And then the little bulldozer had to like shovel the sand out to try to free that ship, as it were. And actually, Marx has kind of predicted that to happen, as it were. Marx did not say
he didn't predict it; he observed it. It was happening in his life.
That is something that I've also seen brought up as just kind of hokey. I'm sorry, I gotta leave in like 5 minutes. Sure. I just want to say one last thing about like the Railway Series stuff. Some people have brought up over the years that just on an objective level, the premise is silly, because like they are treated as people and their experience and how to handle trains comes into it. But objectively, it is a detriment to these railways that they can't just replace the older models with stronger, faster, cheaper ones. You know, they have to like impede progress. Someone could say, well, is this any different than saying like, no, we can't have cars. We need to stick to the horse and buggy, because what will happen to all the poor buggies? Look at their faces. You don't want them to be broken apart and like used as firewood, do you? And I get on that level, but that's like the one where I'm the one element where I'm going to say, look, let's just indulge the fantasy a little bit. But just on my way out, I wanted to note one other idea I had for a story that I might write. Like I said, the last official book was released in 2011. So I thought of making a story with a few illustrations that takes place a couple of years after that, when these characters are still running. You know, society hasn't completely gone off the rails, like Trump hasn't been elected president yet. But you know, like Brexit hasn't quite happened yet. But in that sweet spot, you know, before everything went to crap, I would have a character that was a new build, that was like based on, you know, drawings of a much older engine, but of course built in 2012. And I would tackle like what it's like to be this fresh face, you know, that can speak and everything, but is effectively like a newborn baby who doesn't know how to do anything. And this character would be mentored for a few months by Thomas, who would, you know, show her the ropes, show her how to handle carriages and people and all that stuff. And then she'd be allowed to like run on her own on like, you know, like on the main line and stuff. And for a little while, she idolizes him. She thinks he's the greatest engine that ever lived. And then he has to tell her about the time he got in trouble with the police, about the time he left his conductor behind, about the time he left his coaches behind, about like the time that he effectively had to go fishing for water and his boiler nearly exploded because fish were clogging him up. All of these, the time he like fell down a mine shaft, all these embarrassing, dumb things, like the time
he experimented sexually in college.
Yeah. So he has to tell her about all this stuff and how he's actually kind of a git. But, you know, then she ends up appreciating him for the same reason that the kids appreciate him. They like that these characters are flawed. They like them in spite of, if not because of, all their many screw-ups. And then I thought, well, I figure that far into dieselization, maybe most of the animosity between like steam engines and diesel engines would have fizzled out a bit. Like there's no real reason for the diesels to be so aggressive because they won. They took over the world. They're like 99% of the engines out there. And we're at the point where new ones are being built who are maybe starting to talk to older diesels the way they spoke to steam engines. You know, it's like, get out of here, you old, like, you tea kettle or whatever.
You're out of date. You're just like,
So I thought of having a character who was built based on like one of the latest classes, a class 70, if anyone wants to look it up. And he's only a couple years old himself. And so like he, you know, mainly works on the mainland, but sometimes he has to make deliveries on the island. And these two characters would meet. And when he first sees her, and I would call her some like Stephanie or Julia, you know, some really nice name. He'd think, oh, geez, she must be like a century old. And she corrects them, and you find out these characters are both effectively like little kids. You know, they're both only like a couple of years old. So even though they look as different as any two engines possibly could, even though nobody else like expects them to get along, they end up connecting because, you know, they're both effectively, you know, youngins. They're able to relate that way. And I also thought it'd be neat if like this character kind of has her own existential crisis because she sees all these characters that have been working together from anywhere from like 50 to almost 150 years, who have all this history together. And just like the idea that the books aren't being made anymore, the fact that like she came along after everything already happened, after all the stories have been told. And it's like, what am I even doing here? You know, I already missed it all. I just thought that'd be a neat story in its own right. You may have noticed my ideas get a little out there.
Yeah, they kind of do, but like, you know what? Hey, just like they go venture in the like out there kind of things. They step outside of the line, because you say within the line, then then like some of the fans will just like hate you because like, believe it or not, like romance novels have a very set pattern and very set like formula. And
the Harlequin romance series, they give you
I'm
the
sorry,
outline
I
for the story.
just need to add something to what Joe McClory said, because people stop being a racist because they have more power. Here's the thing you need to keep in mind, that these engines don't have power. None of them do. They're all workhorses.
Yes, they do.
At
they
the
like have
mercy
horsepower and so on.
But I mean that they're all workhorses at the mercy of the humans that own them. And the reason like many of them act so aggressive is because they want to secure their own future. They want to make sure they don't get scrapped. So they're super competitive. And when it seems like, oh, you know, their classes are the ones that are favored, you know, they get to ride high on it a little bit for a little bit. And I just figure that once they've already like secured their place, maybe they wouldn't defend it so aggressively. This is all very, very nuanced, and it's all about talking trains. What the
hell? Because there's always something fascinating when you just like dive deep into this topic or think critically about these sort of things, including like trains.
But is this really any dumber than a robot that turns into a truck?
The robot doesn't turn into a truck. The truck is just one of the manifestations of the robot. It's the same robot.
Sure. No, seriously, I hear so many nerds talk out of their ass just like that. And they do it with a completely straight face at conventions and stuff. And I'm like they seriously
because
as a guy who just spent an hour and 15 minutes talking about Thomas the Tank Engine, you have zero of the legs to stand on.
Yes, I am sorry. I will need to get going now. Okay. I gotta check on my chickens and stuff. But
thank you for
thanks for having me aboard. I mean, I know that we didn't quite branch into like all the topics you usually do. I mean,
okay.
Well, that's fine.
But it is still relevant to the podcast because it is another thing that capitalism has ruined.
Yes. And Groundhog. So take care, Nick. Thanks for stopping by. I'll promote
Thank you.
If
and don't forget to check out his comic book. Has an autistic.
That's what I was gonna say. Thank you.
PlanetRipple.com. That's the best.
Very good.
Autistic and physically disabled.
Ooh, yes. Thank you for coming, Nick. And I did actually finish reading all 6 volumes of Planet Ripple. I did actually quite enjoy it. I already mentioned this to Nick too, and I won't say anything other than Nick. Actually, that twist ending at the end of volume 4, well done. It wasn't like a total surprise, but I got up. I was like, oh damn! And by the oh, he did that right because he like, oh no, like he set it up right. It was a good twist as well. But Nick also has a YouTube channel, Nick on the Planet Ripple as well. That's a link to you can like find it there as well. He does a variety of different like videos on like YouTube, like sometimes the Planet Ripple blogs. They don't necessarily go into spoilers, or if they do, I doubt, but he'll say so if they go into spoilers. But he also does a lot of like Lego videos, like video essays on like Legos, past Lego sets. So there's Lego marquee series, the Lego reruns, but also like shows off his mods that like he has created. So if you dig Legos, you can check that out. He also has like a couple of other like video essays on various different like pop culture things. It's like how difficult it is to go for that entire hour without saying get back on it. See, the thing is, Nick, other people already made that pun. David already made a pun like that too, and John Brockman said, like, geek don't derail this conversation. So well done, Nick. So yeah, Nick on the Planet Ripple, the YouTube channel, planetripple.com, and planetripple.com probably has the links to like not only his DeviantArt, his Twitter, but also his Patreon, and I'm a patron of like Nick Aronson as well. So do check out all those links. And you can also get the books Planet Ripple digitally from ichitalk.io. So if you don't want to give money to the evil company of Amazon,
fair. Itchy.io is the best place to like get the Nick Anderson's books. And so, yes, in the news, the tornadoes happened, and the thing about like the people at the candle factory and the Amazon forced to like still work or something, it reminded me of that like in 1910 or 1914 when there was like a fire happened at one of the factories. As it were. Now, granted, it's just like it wasn't like the fire is happening and then the people were still forced to like continue working at like this like clothes shop as well. No, it's just like, oh, the fire is happening. Oh, because like they just did not, I don't know if there was any regulations about it, but they just did not put any like safety protocols installed to be able to like escape as were. So the workers were trapped in that building as it was burned up in flames as were. And that's just like, but it's worse when it's like the employees were forced to stay at the candle factory and the Amazon fulfillment center because the bosses said so. That's criminal negligence. That has to be criminal negligence. Yes, at least as it were. So like those companies should be brought up challengers, but like who knows if like if it happens, okay, it happens. I hope it happens because like the Triangle Search Race Factory fire. Yes, that's the one I was thinking of. Like, oh, thank you, because I was like hoping it's kind of like. Some people did learn that in school. I happen to didn't. I learned that from like extra history, but it's just like it's in our history.
I think the Citations Needed podcast did an episode on the Triangle Shirtwaist.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I think it's important to know this side of things that like with like a unchecked capitalism, it's terrible for the workers. All of us know that as like socialists and communists and leftists, but like so many people still don't need to understand that. So yeah. And I'm not surprised. I should be surprised to hear someone saying, "But the book's okay." But I'm not surprised because it's America, and this is also Bible Belt too, where it's like, yeah. But to be fair, you can find those like super religious folks across America. There's even in Washington State, where I live, is where again I used to grow up near a farm, like one of the few farms that like around the area too. But like I actually grew up near farms, so not surprising that there's a church that says like destiny is a matter of choice. Yes, they seriously had that on their sign outside. Destiny is a matter of choice, and me and Robert's like, no, it's not.
Speaking of Destiny, there's been, let's see, what's its name? The Netflix Cowboy Bebop. Netflix canceled the second season, which means, of course, all the usual players have come out and said, see, that's what happens when you go woke. Haha, I never watched the original series, but...
I don't watch Destiny because fuck Destiny but it's like I can see the reactionaries like the quartering saying stuff like that, but it's like of course Destiny's reaction.
I don't know if it was Destiny, but I just know that he's kind of a douche.
yeah, he is a douche.
I just watched the thing that Tabernacle did on it, calling them out for being dumbasses and douchebags.
Yeah, terrible. Is where I don't understand what it's like. Next week's topic will be shepherds. What the fuck are they doing to the staple in the middle of the winter? I should not have read that out loud because like I should not give that any more like a comment as well. It's another bit of news actually. I did not know this until but like Bell Hooks, the writer, author, and feminist, died recently in like this past week.
I heard about that.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because like I actually read this on stream. I should like post the video up it on my YouTube channel when I finally get around to it. That like because one of the essays I read early about like by Bell Hooks was her essay Understanding Patriarchy, and you can find a PDF on it because Borders so like I put it up as a PDF, so you can find that PDF Understanding Patriarchy, and that was the first time I was reading it for like feminist critique as well, but that was the first time someone said. But it said it's not just patriarchy. Bell Hooks said it's like it's white supremacist patriarchal capitalism, as it were.
Imperialism. She had the whole
in understanding patriarchy, she only added white supremacy and capitalism as it were. But like I mentioned, that she would be one of those like feminist writers would just add those whole other things that like some would shorten to be the hierarchy as were. That as I say, it's the white supremacist, cis-sexual, allo, patriarchal, ableist, settler, colonialist, imperialist.
What is the name of the actress, trans woman from Orange Is the New Black?
I don't know about the trans woman from the Orange News Back. I know of the trans man that recently came out of Elliot Page, but like or not that long ago came out trans, but not know about the trans woman on the Orange News Back
because she had a sit down conversation with Bell Hooks a couple of years back.
Oh, okay. Mark C now has like posted something up too about that, or about something like similar. What else is like in news that's happening? Oh, right. I heard about this. I had to like find it and like do more research on it too, because I remember happened recently. Also, Honduras has like their recent elections, as it were. I don't remember the results, but it looks like hopefully it is, of course, the left leaning or left of center like candidate will win, because like, yeah, Honduras. Not surprising, had many different like countries in Latin America. That's one of the countries were screwed over in the coup recently, like in 2009. That's the last time we involved in their government, and that's the government that's like
Reverend Cox. Still... There we go.
Reverend Cox, yeah. So Honduras is like new elections. Hopefully, I don't remember the results as were. I forgot the results of the Chile election too. There's a lot of elections happening actually in Latin America that we should follow up on to like know more about. Like Nicaragua too, because like Chile, Honduras, Nicaragua, like Colombia recently. Not that long ago, Colombia had elections too, as well as a long general strike that I need to look more into too. Those are all other than Colombia. I don't. We were involved in Colombia at some point. I'm sure we were at some point. But Chile, Honduras, Nicaragua, and yeah, those three. They recently had elections, and we also and also in the past have been like involved in their terrible governments which is what we regularly do.
I think it was Tobago. No, was it Tobago? Recently kicked out the Queen.
Barbados. We mentioned that last week. And the prime, and when after that happened, the prime minister on BBC was asked of like, so how friendly are you with China? And she called her out as like, wow, we just like form our new republic as it were. I just got elected prime minister, and you're talking to me about China. So you don't see us as our own independent nation, so where you see us as a proxy, as a tool of someone else, do you really? Well, I just got called out. It's like, yeah, you did. That did recently happen. What else in like in the news has happened? And anyone in the chat,
see now other stuff I wanted to talk about, but then we spent an hour and a half talking about TJ Joints.
Sorry.
No, I can't even remember stuff that happened this week.
Probably why we should actually like both of us or all of us so like
we should maintain that document and put stuff in there so that we know what we want to talk about.
yeah, exactly. Like once I hear something interesting, it's like, oh, that's interesting in the news to talk about. Just like add it to the Google Doc, like find a link to it as we're because I'm there. I right now kind of like scrolling through like as terrible as it is, Facebook news or wait, okay. So this is something that like Joanna Roberts like sent me a screenshot of, but apparently, according to like a secret like conversations that was as reported in the French newspaper, David Cage, the director of like the video games at Quantum Dreams like Indigo Prophecy, Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and Detroit Become Human, he has said that his games are not content warning for like a homophobic slur. His games are not for fags. Yes. Now, I will say this: if we all boycott like Quantum Dreams games because of that statement, as were, which honestly I can't believe David Cage should say something like that. David Cage thinks way too highly of himself as a director. Honestly, he likes to think that it's like his games is like the amazing art. It's like this is such good art that they'll beat their own movie. It's like, no, David Cage, you're a movie director that like decides to make video games instead, as it were, or figure you can like get into like playing video games instead of like making actual movies. But he's a shit director of like movies too.
And for Omicron, Fahrenheit, Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, Detroit Become... Oh, okay.
Yes. And Groundhog mentioned David Cage is the same person who said, in my games, all women are whores. Yeah, so I'm not surprised, especially with how like some of the women are depicted in those games too, honestly. No. Elliot Page, before he came out, so he was in Beyond Two Souls, as were, and he did not want his like it to be sexualized whatsoever, or something like that, because a lot of actors written in the contract as like then they're not going to do nudity, as it were. So in other movies, if like the character has to like show some skin or something like that, they'll get a body double, as well. And some actresses and actors would like get to choose their butts, as it were, based from their body doubles, as it were. But like no, Elliot Page had it in his contract at the time. It's like, no, I'm not doing nudity for like Beyond Two Souls, as it were. They managed to work around that. In the final product, as it were, you can't really see it. There is a shower scene that like, and he knew about that. However, in modified versions of Beyond Two Souls, you can actually see Elliot Page's like characters' butts in the shower scene. When he found out about that, he was pissed. Actually, it's kind of like, I did not want to show my body, and yet you just added my body in there anyway. This is like, so David Cage is saying that all the women in my games are whores. I'm not surprised that he says that like his games are not for queers anyway. But again, if we do boycott all Quantum Dreams like games, no big loss whatsoever, because they weren't classics. They were interesting, but it's just like we can live without them. They were the kind of games that tried to say, sure, look, video games can be cinematic as well.
He's making a Star Wars game, guys.
That's right. So that was the important thing that Joanna Robinson mentioned to me, is where like, but Quantum Dreams is now making a Star Wars game. But so it's just like, yeah,
it's an intricately branching action adventure game that can be. So it's the exact same game they've always made, but this time it's a Star Wars.
Yes. And yes, we do love good Star Wars games with good writing. BioWare shows us that it can be done, and Obsidian
KOTOR 2, excellent games.
Yes, exactly. And Obsidian can do that too. You just like get good writers, and you can get good games. You also gotta like actually have like good developers that are committed to making good games, and they also make those games as well. Because like EA, what else is going to happen? Oh, the Kellogg strike is also still going on, and that's still a big thing. We had a conversation about cornflakes in the live chat as the trades conversation was going on too.
John Kellogg was fucking obsessed with masturbation.
Yeah, I did heard about that. Like many people believe that like, oh, the best way to like prevent boys or to masturbate is to like cut out the first game. Not true.
It won't prevent it, but that's why they do it.
Yep, that's one of the main reasons. Nowadays, it's like could be any given reasons. Hopefully, it's not like hopefully in America they don't do it automatically. I just checked the statistics that you posted in the link in the live chat. Washington State is only 50%, so it's only like 50% get circumcised. So it seems to be up to like parents' choice. And yes, the American Association of Medicine actually does say approve of it, basically because there is like net medical benefits to doing it, but it's only like 0.01% as it were. So it's very tiny. So it's not like a big enough percentage of like net benefits to say like, no, do it everyone. It's like, it's very beneficial. It's just like, well, it's beneficial. So if you want to do it, go ahead. But like our arguments, it's like, okay, but consent, bodily autonomy, the child gets no choice in their actions and like affects their body as it were. And we don't do it to like females do. It happens in other cultures that we do, but we kind of like we are critical of like any kind of like genital mutilations to babies, little kids, as it were, or of like any gender. It was easier than cutting off their hands, which would have like stopped fat lipping. You know what? I'm sure that like some people will find a way. Honestly, even if like they don't have arms, they will probably find a way.
Just Google stump porn or amputee porn.
Then you have to remove their arms or something. I don't know. But then they just like rub up against something. I don't know. Oh, what to do? But yeah, so the Kellogg's strike is still going on. Even though like they've been like trying to do still a bunch of like different things. This were yeah, Kellogg's thinks that like they're going to like I agree, Groundhog. No intersex mutilation. It's just like so often as like as it was before, or it's like, oh, we don't know, because they usually about like an inch or a centimeter or something like that. They just measure the thing and then they'll determine boy or girl as a word. Sometimes it's clear, but it's just like other times, oh, we don't know as it were. And it's like, we'll decide right here. And it's just like, great, thanks. No consideration for the child or whatsoever.
Police have obtained a warrant for Alec Baldwin's phone over the shooting that happened on set a while back.
That's interesting. A new word for incel, a cornflake.
Instead of snowflake.
There's that too. Actually, okay, so going through a Discord server that shares things about like various different things that are happening. Oh, this is kind of interesting. A copy and link to a tweet that we see. Yes, I agree, George P. Fuck the sit sets. What's wrong with the sit sets? I just don't know.
Everything.
I mean, once like some men actually seriously ask the questions like, is it gay to go on dates? I'm just like, I give up on them. Just gonna give up on them as well. Or it's like, is it gay to wipe your ass? They're like wipe your backside after you're using the bathroom. And it's just like, so to try to not be gay, you're going to go around with a sticky butt, a sticky dirty butt. Some cis men?
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Nancy Pelosi is opposed to any sort of bill that would prevent members of Congress from trading in stocks.
She's opposed to that.
Yes, she's in favor of corruption.
Fucking course she is. Okay, the vote blue no matter who crowd. And some of you would say that like, oh, we're going to pull Biden left. How the fuck has that been working? It's been over a year now. Honestly,
he's done a few things, but not the big things, not the necessary things.
Not the big promises, as it were. Mm-hmm. If you're not disappointed by what Biden's been doing, I have a problem with you. I trust you if you're not disappointed with what Biden's done. If you have been disappointed with a lot of things that he's done, then like, okay, you're at least paying attention. You're at least listening to the leads. You're at least like observing what is happening. But if you're not, it's like, oh, fuck you. You voted for Biden over Bernie, then fuck you. Anyway, what I link in the chat is actually it's a date yesterday posted on Twitter, day 13 of the longest UK gig economy strike in Blackpool, and it said smiling faces on the picket line as it were. And you see a picture of a couple of like gig economy workers just like out striking, and piles and piles and piles like packages like not being picked up to be distributed. So like good on those gig workers for striking for better pay and like better work as it were.
Well, Starbucks recently unionized.
Yes, one in Buffalo.
Yep. Shop.
Yes, one shop is like yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's infinitely more than zero. So.
Yes, but other Starbucks shops have been like had like votes to like unionize, and hopefully say they do unionize as a word, because like everyone just unionize. That's probably what I should do at work. Honestly, just seriously talk to like everyone, see if I can get most everyone on board. I swear. And that's right. And I did hear about like the January 6th committee and the commissions as well, because like Mark Meadows was receiving text messages from Fox News hosts. That's where, can you talk to Trump to get him to stop? This is not good. This doesn't make us look good. All while when January 6th was happening on air, they were saying that it's Antifa storming the Capitol. Which
Antifa mittens.
Yes, which proves to us.
And of course, 'tis the season. Santifa.
Oh yes, Santifa. Like I love that gift you get, that meme you have of Richard Spencer being like the halls, and like the Antifa as being the bows of Holly. Deck. Brilliant there.
And then he ran the fuck away.
He did. But that was not the only time though, because we also glitter bomb him. I love the glitter bombs because like it does the thing, disrupt the event and disrupt the talks as it were, but also makes him fabulous. And it's not lethal too.
Congratulations, you're gay now.
And he hates that too, as well.
Let's see, Milo Yiannopoulos is back.
And not gay anymore.
Well, I mean, he has relapsed a few times with his husband. Meaning that he's been caught a couple of times. The fucking vile piece of shit. I hope he dies in pain soon.
Yes, so many terrible things. And just, what I don't understand from like the freedom of speech crowd is like no, these people got to like have a platform. These people should be allowed to like talk at colleges and stuff like that. Some of them probably didn't know that Milo Yiannopoulos was actually a danger and threat to the trans students at this colleges that he would go to, because he would like
out them. He would list their names and
yeah. So it's like, as whether or not like a Milo Yiannopoulos is a fascist or not, that can be up to debate. I say pseudo-fascist, or at least like a grifter that works with them for sure, absolutely. But I agree with like using Antifa tactics against Milo Yiannopoulos, because treat him as a threat, as it were, just like a fascist a threat to livelihoods of marginalized communities. So yeah, it's like there was Mithra, you mentioned in the chat about like Boris lost by re-election that made a safe Tory seat for nearly 200 years. Yes, I heard about that. Yes, the Tories lost a seat that they had for over 200 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mithra, because I'm trying to go and this was brought up. I think it was a Lib Dem. It was a liberal Democrat that like won that seat, as it were, which is like, you know what? Hey, the Lib Dems are not like super left, or at least not as left as I am. They're I don't know what was the first left wing party in the UK, as it were. Okay, you can hear me now.
Yes. Oh god, headphones are so uncomfortable.
Yeah, Nick Anderson had like a trouble before we went on the air, because like the Zoom was like saying, "Oh, want to switch to this like output like audio devices," or and he hated the oversized headphones that he has. I think I have a pair of them too, but they're
for me the autism thing is mostly sound and touch. Lights I'm okay with.
Yeah. I don't think I have any oversensory issues, as it were, at least not that I'm aware of. Or if I have those sensory issues, as it were, I managed to tolerate it, as it were. So it's a liberal Democrat, Helen Margaret, that won the seat, beat Niall Sturgis Husk for that seat, as it were. Again, yeah, they lost a seat that they held down for over 200 years, as it were. Groundhog said in the chat, old news, but like New Zealand will be getting easier self-identification based changes. Oh yes,
apparently Japan has a really good system for that sort of thing. I mean, basically you just walk up to a kiosk and tell it that you want to make certain changes, and it does.
Yes, I think Washington State, for like on the ID cards and driver's licenses, you can't just ask for like your ID to be either M for gender ID, be M for male, F for female, of course, or just X. And as were, I'm tempted to go with the X, as were. And yeah, that's why I thought Mithril Lib Dems is very centrist now. They used to be like more lefty, as were.
What's his name? Older white guy accused of anti-Semitism was left.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Corbyn.
Yes,
he was leftish.
Yeah. Oh yes.
And then they kicked him out and moved firmly to the right.
Back to the right where they were with like New Labour from Tony Blair, because Keir Starmer is just barely like a Blairite, I swear. And there's many Blairites that still in the Labour Party right now. And yeah, they hated Jeremy Corbyn because he was like too far left for them. So then even some of the Labour
and even him was just a sock dim, right?
It's like he was actually a labor unionist, rep, something like that. But like, I'm not sure exactly of his policies, but I think he's more just like sock them, as it were. Probably a bit left to Bernie Sanders, as it were. But it's like not like he was not like a Stalinist, as unlike what the BBC kind of showed him as. That's like Captain Anthony said one time. The last time we had Captain Anthony on to talk about Kurosawa, because like, yeah, okay, just because he wears that kind of like winter hat, as it were, and you Photoshop a hammer sickle on it, and then put a backdrop of the Kremlin behind him, it doesn't mean that he is like a Stalinist. Okay, so he vacationed to Moscow one time. So what? It's a beautiful city, I'm sure. Let's see. Looking through at the news that's like happened recently, and I don't remember. I'm trying to remember much. It's like, so Groundhog said, "Here's this is just going to be a form of like some money, but like mostly it's just like okay, so you have to fill out a form. It does cost a lot of money for the processing fee to like get the changes as it were. Okay, yeah." Saw this shared in like far better than the court case. Oh yeah, if you don't have like a appear in front of a judge to do that sort of thing, that saves a lot of processes. But speaking of worker salaries, there at Twitter, someone saw a screenshot of this hiring temporary associates sign at Fred Meyer's. That's where I almost worked at Fred Meyer's actually. Starting rate $17. Yes,
that's a funny way of spelling scab.
Yes, because like starting rate $17 an hour, full-time, part-time, minimum age of 18 years, no experience necessary, willing to cross a picket line. Yes, fuck that. Okay, that's a QR code there. So again, you can spam that QR code with just like fake applications as a word. Don't try to be rude, but definitely don't say that like, oh yeah, I'm be willing to hire, as word, because like they fuck crossing the picket line. But it's Fred Meyers, so yeah. Let's see. Any other news that's like happened going through my thing is where, because I'm almost spent as we're to talk about stuff.
Yeah, pretty much got nothing left. Problem is it's Christmas, so
yeah,
winter break. Sorry, not Christmas break. So not on the road as much, so harder to keep up with my podcasts. So
I work all day and something like that, but like sometimes if I listen to the daily news podcasts as they come out on the day of, so sometimes forget it later in the week. But then again, I also don't like write them down or like keep it up as a word to like see, oh, okay, here's something like new to like interesting to find out. Oh wait, okay, so this is not something I saw this from work as a word. So as I did hear from my oldest brother that my younger brother is finally got at least his first shot for the COVID-19 vaccine, as it were, because before he was like unvaccinated because his choice. But the Biden did sign an executive order in September 9th for the all federal employees, federal employee contractors, and any large private employer of more of 100 employees or more. Everyone has to be vaccinated by mid-January, somewhere. January, whatever, January. I think the dates can like vary. However, yes, they
did so because it was one of the wingnuts, Tyler monkey assholes appointed by Trump.
Yeah, in Georgia. And so I did not know about this until an email was sent out publicly to everyone in my company, as where it's like, since there is a block and an injunction of the executive order by like a court in Georgia, don't worry, we're not going to enforce. No one is going to be terminated because like they didn't get like the fully vaccinated. And I'm just like, why? Chairman, CEO, they actually do know me. They actually do know I'm a narco-syndicalist, as it were, because I'm not selling about my politics at the work. Why are you coddling these like anti-vaxxers? Why? Just But my younger brother still has to get fully vaccinated, at least get 2 shots, or show proof of vaccination in order to get into movie theaters or restaurants. So if that continues, then that'll probably be the way he finally gets to like get the vaccines, as it were. Because no, he can't see anime movies with us. Okay, so I mentioned that like Mark Meadows has been held in contempt in like January 6th probe, and the Democrats are hoping that they can get that done before 2012, because it's in less than a month of like 2012 is going to come out, and it's going to come to us, and hopefully you'll be okay, because again, like we haven't yet got to 2022 yet, and already there's like tornadoes in December, deadly tornadoes in December too.
Like I said, I can go outside in shorts and a t-shirt. This weather is.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until I actually heard the reports of it. Oh, there was a heat wave in like in Washington State. Really? There was? And you're like, yeah, average of like six degrees and 7 degrees. Like, no wonder I was sweating so much in my apartment wearing my 4 layers of clothes, as it were. That kind of shows you just prefer to wear more sleeves as were and do those things. Yep. I've been seeing some headlines from Denmark now, like the Rohingya genocide survivor testifies in Argentinian court in like a universal judicial case. Okay, probably just like a short line and a paragraph of it, because like, but I don't know. I don't know much about like this particular genocide as where it happened in Argentina though. So it's like, okay, is this part? Oh no, I'm not familiar with this genocide. So yeah, just a short little thing. So yeah, just a headline. I think okay, so we're close to the 2-hour mark. I do have to actually go into the work today, so I think we will like end the show here. So
that sounds good. I'm gonna go ahead and walk this guy and feed this guy.
Yes, David. Yes, we know that you and Ellie have like a little gnomes, so that's good. I haven't even done my Christmas shopping as well, and I think I'm just gonna tell my family like, sorry, I'm not gonna buy you presents. Maybe my nieces and nephews. I don't know, but it's just like I hate it. It's like,
hey, they're your elves. You invented elves.
Yes, Nick Henson, PlanetRipple.com, Nick on the Planet Ripple YouTube channel. I'm Summer Geek on Twitter, Summer Geek on YouTube, Summer Geek on Twitch, and yeah, I'm gonna be working a lot, probably until like indefinitely. So I don't know when I'm next gonna be like streaming on Twitch or upload a new YouTube channel, but like keep it up there as we're. Oh, it's in Burma, so I guess it's testifying in the Argentinian court. Then I don't know why they're.
Crimes against humanity have all courts capable of trying cases of crimes against humanity have universal jurisdiction.
Oh, okay.
So you don't have to rely on a local court overcoming the corruption and prejudice in order to do the thing.
Okay. And then John Bradley, your part. Yeah. Then you have another podcast.
Yes, Dungeons and Debacles. You're currently on hiatus for recording. I don't know if episodes probably aren't going to be coming out because our producer, the guy who does all the editing work, is doing lots of vacation stuff. But we'll be doing stuff. We'll probably record a Christmas episode as soon as we come back on the 1st.
Yeah. All
right. Bye-bye, everybody. Stay safe.
Goodbye.
Hydrate, medicate, masturbate.
Back to self-care. CharityLinks.com too.